how to trick your brain into liking difficult things. Why do we prefer scrolling through short videos instead of studying? Why is it that even though we know exercise is important, we still end up lying in bed and don't feel like moving? The truth is, this isn't really your fault. Your brain is naturally wired to resist difficult things. So, is there any way to make our brain actually like doing hard things? Absolutely. In this video, I'm going to share 4 methods that can help. But first, let's talk about why the brain resists difficult things in the first place. Actually, it all comes down to 3 basic instincts. The first instinct is the principle of conserving energy. Your brain only makes up about 2% of your body weight, but it uses around 20% to 25% of your body's energy. Because of that, the brain evolved with one main goal: save energy whenever possible. If it doesn't have to use energy, it won't. That's why it prefers running on autopilot. By autopilot, I mean habits and routines. When you're doing something familiar, your brain uses very little energy. But when you're doing something difficult, it has to work much harder. So, in order to save energy, the brain naturally resists difficult tasks. The second instinct is the need for immediate rewards. Back in ancient times, finding food meant a better chance of survival. Finding shelter meant immediate safety. Because of that, the brain evolved to seek rewards that happen right away. The problem is that many of the most valuable things today come with delayed rewards. For example, exercise only pays off if you keep doing it consistently. Reading only improves you over time. These are things the brain doesn't naturally like because the benefits don't show up immediately. When there's no short-term reward, the brain doesn't feel motivated to do them. The third instinct is avoiding failure. In ancient times, a serious mistake could cost you your life. As a result, the brain developed a stronger fear of failure than a desire for success. If you don't try, you can't fail. That's how the brain sees it. So when you start a business or try to learn a new skill, your brain often interprets it as a potential threat, and that creates a lot of resistance. So based on these 3 instincts, the reason we resist difficult things is not because we're lazy, it's because of how our brains are naturally wired. Now let's talk about 4 ways to trick your brain into doing difficult things. The first method is the 5-minute rule. Just tell yourself you'll do it for 5 minutes. Read for 5 minutes. Exercise for 5 minutes. The brain usually resists getting started more than anything else. 5 minutes doesn't feel difficult enough for the brain to see it as a threat. So there's very little resistance. And once those 5 minutes are over, your brain often realizes, hey, that wasn't so bad. I can keep going. The second method is breaking tasks down. Take one big task and break it into many smaller tasks. When each step feels simple and manageable, the brain doesn't see it as difficult, and naturally, there's much less resistance. The third method is immediate rewards. Every time you complete a small task, give yourself a sense of accomplishment. For example, check a box on your to-do list. That small feeling of achievement encourages your brain to keep going. The fourth method is cognitive reframing. In other words, consciously replace negative thoughts about difficult tasks with neutral or positive ones. For example, when you're reading a book, your first thought might be, this book is way too thick, it's too hard, I'll never finish it. Instead, try thinking, it's okay, I'll just read a small section. If I can remember even one useful idea today, then reading this book was worth it. The brain has something called neuroplasticity. Every time we do something difficult, new neural connections are formed. Over time, those connections get stronger, and eventually that difficult thing won't feel quite as difficult anymore. At the same time, your dopamine system begins to recalibrate. In the past, maybe scrolling through social media or eating sweets was what made you feel good. But now, every time you do something difficult, even something small, your brain releases a little dopamine. Gradually, your brain starts associating that difficult activity with pleasure. What we're really doing is training the brain. We're teaching it that difficult things aren't something to avoid. And over time, it becomes more comfortable facing challenges. Alright, that's it for today's video. If you'd like to see more content about self-improvement and personal growth, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.